Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Today we're talking about Elio and his Rolling Eagle gameplay. Okay, so we just got the new Legendary Hero Elio event added to the game here. This is obviously how you unlock the new Hero Elio. It costs $5, at least in the United States, to unlock him initially. And then once you unlock him, you get the option of buying additional gold heads with, random free crap at every level. So I'll just go quickly through this and show you all the levels of gold heads you can buy. Caps out at $100. I think there are two $50 levels here. Yeah, and then you get to the $100 level when you get 75 heads. Now, the nice thing about Elio is that once you unlock him, you can use generic gold heads to power him up. So I do think you need to spend that initial $5 to get him, but once you unlock him, you don't need to buy the Elio packs. You can get them just through your generic heads and level them up. Okay, so like in my other video I mentioned, I was very happy to see that Elio had both the PvP and the mobility trees because they give you a lot of movement speed. The other thing, if you look at his talent tree, you'll see that his foundational talent gives you an additional 5% movement speed. So I was very happy with all that. Movement speed, super important for flying cav. Elio can provide all of that. Okay, it was sort of unfortunate timing. I released my last video like within the hour when they released Elio's skills, and I didn't have a chance to review them before. So let's take a look at his skills, and quite frankly, his skills are not very good for flying cav. I'm really disappointed in them. We'll start with the rage skill here, backup plan. Backup plan, it does a couple of things. First, it does 2 instances of skill damage per second for 3 seconds, and the damage factor is at 400 when you max it out. Okay, do some quick math here. 2 times 400, that's 800, times 3, that's 2400. That's a lot of damage. That's a very high damage factor, like basically on par or better with the current generation legendary heroes. Okay, very good. A couple, things about it. It is single target. Okay, you obviously prefer AoE, but 2400 still hits really hard. You'd also prefer the damage to be all up front instead of over time. Okay, this is over time, but it's only 3 seconds. So you get that 2400 damage factor pretty quickly. Elio hits like a truck. That's great. Okay. The second part of the skill is really weird. So whenever the skill is active, so for those 3 seconds the damage is ticking, you get 10% march speed and you also cannot be obstructed. Okay, here's the thing about flying legions. Flying legions can never be obstructed, period. Okay, now flying legions can be crowd controlled, which means they can be feared or they can be snared or slowed or stunned or all those things, right? They can never be obstructed, not even by other flying legions. So you can't be obstructed, but if you're a flying legion anyway, you can't be obstructed, period. So this part of the skill like does no good if you're leading flying legions. That's really weird that they'd make this a key part of the new flying hero skill. The other thing about this this damage factor is like this is like essentially 6 ticks of damage. What does that remind you of? Well, I'll tell you what it reminded me of, and that's the bullying beast, right? Because remember, what does the bullying beast want you to do? It wants you to do, among other things, separate instances of innate skill damage, and like 6 ticks per rage cycle of innate skill damage is really good, right? It's better than everyone other than Freya here, right? Freya's going to do more than 6, but other than that, Elio is actually like the second most powerful enabler of the bullying beast there is, which is quite weird because the bullying beast also doesn't fly, right? So I look at this rage skill and I'm like, hey, Elio actually could be a pretty good ground cav commander, which is not something I intended to say for the new flying hero. All right, going through his skill tree here, the second one, this is actually another kind of like, what are they thinking skill here, right? So when he's leading a flying legion, okay, so it's flying coded. He gets aerial when he's located in an area that ground legions can't reach, okay? And when you have that, you do like 10% more just all damage to ground legions. So that itself is good. But let's take a look at the aerial buff here, right? So two things. When I'm aerial, I can't be hit with normal attacks from melee ground legions. All right. I also can't launch counterattacks against those melee ground legions, right? Well, I know here I gain aerial when I'm located in an area that a ground legion can't reach. So if they can't reach me, for the most part, they can't launch attacks against me anyway. Okay, that's not 100% true, right? Let's say I was, on the edge of the river here and the melee region can't get there, but they could stand like right next to it and attack me. Okay, every so often there's going to be a scenario when I'm in an area where the melee can't go, but they could still potentially attack me. I guess that's true. But most of the time, this first buff doesn't really do anything. Okay. Now there's another way you can get aerial, and we'll talk about later on. But this condition here, it seems to be pretty not that important. The second thing is when you have this aerial buff and you're hit with a normal attack from a ranged legion, the enemy has a 10% chance to miss. All right, a 10% chance to miss just means a 10% damage reduction. It's not amazing, but sure, I'll take it. The other thing is I can't launch counterattacks at all against ranged ground legions when I'm aerial. Basically, anytime I'm leading a flying legion. Okay, that means then when ranged legions attack me, they got a 10% chance to miss and a 100% chance to evade my counterattack damage. Um, that's a nerf, right? You'd rather not have this because a 10% chance for ranged legions to miss you, it's okay. At a cost of a 100% reduction in your counterattack damage, no, that sucks. I'd rather not have the second effect at all, right? So this second thing, all right, the 10% damage more to ground legions just sort of generically is fine. This aerial effect, kind of weird and doesn't seem to be great, especially the second part here. Here's the other thing I'll say about aerial, right? If there's anything I'm certain of, I am 1000% positive that this won't be coded well, and this is going to produce all sorts of bugs all the time, and you're going to see people complaining about the forums on this from now until when the game ends, right? I have no confidence that they're going to be able to effectively program this, so it triggers all the time when you're in an area where the melee can't get to and has this effect. So I think this thing is just like a self-inflicted wound here that isn't that good to begin with. Okay. Third effect, okay. This is just a flat, stat boost, so it's pretty easy to understand. So you always get a 20% attack bonus. Okay. When you're leading a flying magic legion, 30% skill damage. That's really good. Okay. When you're leading flying marksman legions, 25% all damage. Also really good. Now, like I said, I think wyvern riders are actually not good, period, outside of long range warfare seasons. So the fact that this is good for them is good, but I think they'll still suck unless they're in the long range warfare season. Okay. Then if you're leading a flying cav legion, you get 30% attack resistance. Oh my god, do the developers even play their own game? When you're leading flying cav, you are not trying to tank the enemy. You're not trying to sit in a long fight. You're trying to get in, kill vulnerable or wounded legions quickly and get out. The last thing you want is attack is defensive stats. Now look, they're better than nothing, but you would so much prefer skill damage bonus. You would so much prefer all damage bonus. So either the developers don't understand how their game works, or they're specifically just putting their thumb in the eye of Eagle players. Because attack resistance, this is almost the last buff you would want as an Eagle player. So as an Eagle player, I hate this. Okay. Force skill. A lot of things going on here. Okay, first of all, you get 10% march speed. Nice. Second, you get a HP bypass of 15%. Also nice. Third, when you're leading a flying legion, so this third part's flying coded, you get 1.5% movement speed every second, maxing out at 15%. Okay, so I will get an additional 15% for leading a flying legion. Why couldn't they just give me 15% movement speed to start with? I don't know, because they want to be weird and they want my marches to desync when I'll spend a lot of time making sure that they all have the exact same movement speed or similar movement speeds so they stick together. So this is just annoying for the sake of being annoying, but whatever. Okay. So when I get to that max 15%, I get a buff called Cloud Piercer's Mark. Okay. What happens when I have Cloud Piercer's Mark is the next time I do a normal attack, I also do some skill damage, capping out at 800. Okay, that's pretty good. I get a bonus 800 skill damage the first time I do damage, which is actually pretty good, in particular for flying cav, because that is front-loaded damage. That's what you want, okay? Now, whenever I stop moving, I lose my march speed buff. So you got to be constantly moving. You can't be staging anywhere. You got to be moving back and forth. A little itchy on the mouse there, annoying, but whatever. But I still keep the Cloud Piercer mark for 3 seconds. So you better keep moving or it stops. Okay. And then also when I do that Cloud Piercer mark damage, I get some enemy HP bypass of 15%. Also pretty good. This ends up being a pretty good skill that is like way overcomplicated than it needs to be. But the bottom line, it is fine. Just make sure that like you keep moving and you move straight into combat. You don't pause for more than 3 seconds because then you'll screw it all up. Okay, let's look at the Awakened skill. This one is pretty interesting. When I'm leading a Flying Legion, when Backup Plan is activated, Backup Plan's my Rage skill. So for those 3 seconds that's doing ticking damage and I'm awakened, I get this bonus, okay? I get Aerial, okay? If I already had Aerial, I get some bonus damage and I get some more March speed. If I didn't already have Aerial, that means I get Aerial. Okay, remember, by default, Aerial basically kicks in when I'm in an area that ground legions can't reach. So I'm on the river, on top of a mountain, something like that. The Awaken skill makes it so I get it regardless of where I'm at when the rage skill goes off for those 3 seconds. If I already had it, I get some additional bonuses. Okay, so this is actually pretty impressive if you were a ground unit, because when my rage skill goes off, I become immune to other ground legions and I can't be obstructed. So this is pretty good in general, but especially good for ground units as well. You can imagine a scenario where this guy's leading ground cav, he charges in, hits some enemy units. Obviously you focus fire the cav as soon as it gets in range, but when this goes off, he can't be obstructed. He gains march speed bonus. He can't be hit with enemy ground attacks, and he has a slight damage decrease against enemy range attacks, but they can still hit him pretty well. So you get in, you do your damage, you get away. Okay. Someone in my comments mentioned to me, hey, they think Elio's really good for Roots of War for grabbing the stone and the mana stone in the middle. I think that's right because his skills are really benefiting him from like getting in and getting away and not getting hit, which is great for Roots of War if you're trying to gain the Mana Stone. It's not that great if you're leading Eagle Calf. Okay. Anyway, those are my thoughts about Elio. I'm really happy to see his talent tree here. I'm really unhappy with his skill set. I also don't think for Flying Cav he has any natural pets. I'll do a detailed video about that later on. I'm still gonna play Eagles, but my enthusiasm has diminished somewhat since I've seen Elio's toolkit. I think he's not terrible. I think like if you're playing Celestials, he's really good. In seasons when you have long range warfare, he is very good for Wyvern Riders. For Flying Cav, yeah, I mean he's better than Bayhorn, but he's not nearly as good as I hoped he might be. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. And until next time, you stay classy, Belleron.